I think for all of us who teach in public educational institutions, I think teaching is a political act, because public education is highly political. In fact, it's probably the most, we don't regulate the banks. If we regulated the banks the way we regulate education, the economy might be a little bit better right now. I mean, it's, don't get me going on that. But I teach at the City University of New York, but I began my teaching career teaching at Seattle Central Community College. I taught women's studies. My classes were overwhelmingly students of color, and at that moment in time, in spite of Seattle's small black population, it was overwhelmingly African American. And to this day I say I learn more from my students. And I'll never forget this. There was a young man in the class who, I'm sure he was gay, but he also was a cross-dresser. And he would come into class in these wild caftans, and the black women couldn't stand it. And we had a discussion about it, and they said, he's making fun of us. And it was sort of one of the first discussions that deal with issues of sexuality and dressing and class and so forth. I mean, that stayed with me even today, to understand that sort of like how different groups of people react to each other. Then when we moved to Cleveland, I taught at Cuyahoga Community College, and I taught on the Central Campus, which was in downtown Cleveland. And Cleveland is a city divided by a river, the Cuyahoga River. And I lived on the east side, which was racially integrated. And when I lived in Cleveland, the west side was all white. And there was a huge white power office. And I never would want to live on the west side. I walked into my class, the white students all sat on one side and the black students sat on the other. I would literally force the students. I'd just say, we're not sitting this way. I mean, that's sort of like, that's a political act. Now I teach at the City University of New York. I began teaching at Medgar Evers College, and I think when I was teaching there, there were only 11 white faculty. Student body was 99% African American or Afro-Caribbean. The administration was all African American. It's very different because, for example, Howard has a lot of white faculty, all black students, but white faculty. This is a school embedded in the black community, and I felt for the first time in my life I listened. I had to listen. I think that white people don't know how to listen to black people unless they're only 1% or 2% or 3%. I think, I mean, to me, that's how privilege set in. It was very interesting. I was at Medgar Evers the moment of the O.J. Simpson verdict. And it gave you a whole, if you were white, a whole different perspective on how different parts of the community viewed it. And one of my closest friends, a historian named Eileen Boris, taught at Howard. And Eileen and I talk a lot about the commonality of our experiences, being white women, teaching black history at a black college, and all the things you have to deal with and how you learn about race. And I learned more about race in my 5 years at Medgar than anything I've ever read. And this is dedicated to you, John Hope Franklin, because you died today and I'm very sad.